Global business confidence is returning, encouraging a fresh attitude to risk-taking. That's according to research published today by Sage. Ivan Epstein, the CEO and co-founder of Sage Africa, Australia, Middle East and Asia, is here to give us some insight into how South Africa is positioned in Africa relative to the rest of the world. Thanks for joining us today. So you did a survey of, and this is an interesting survey because it looks at small companies, small and medium-sized companies, and I suppose that gives us some insight into the challenges that small business owners are facing. But what is interesting is that they're the most optimistic they've all been in 3 years. I mean, what were the key factors that drove the optimism?
I think if you look at it from a global standpoint, they were optimistic. In South Africa, turning to South Africa, they were business owners of small to medium enterprises were more optimistic about their own prospects than they were about the country's prospects. So while they thought there were issues that lay ahead from a country perspective in terms of their own businesses, and that.
How does that work for you? I mean, where does that, how do you weigh that up against each other, where you've got the environment that they're very, I suppose one could say pessimistic on, but certainly not optimistic on, and yet they're very, things are looking good for the businesses?
Well, if you look at the type of person that will start a business, you're talking about entrepreneurship and primarily entrepreneurs who start their own businesses. They would certainly be confident about their own abilities because these are people that get out there, make it happen, take the risks, and despite all odds, generally when they're successful, they can overcome all those risks and they go against the norm. Mm-hmm. So they would say, well, we believe in ourselves, but we know that from a country perspective, there are major obstacles that lie ahead. So while they do see certain country specifics being pessimistic, they certainly believe in their own confidence and ability.
I mean, in terms of running through some of the country issues here, anything that stands out from that? Because, just at a glance, looking at government bureaucracy, looking at issues around labor, but for you, what really stood out in terms of what small businesses are grappling with right now?
Well, when we did the survey, this latest survey, they really spoke about government bureaucracy, new labour legislation and increased labour legislation, which they thought would be an inhibitor to the growth of their businesses. Now, despite that, even though you hear people complaining about issues like that, entrepreneurs and people starting small businesses still get on with their job, and they do, you see quite a high success rate coming through. But they did feel that, even the increased new BEE legislation and all those factors where people would be negative about came into it from a survey perspective. Mm-hmm. But when push comes to shove, I really don't believe these will be major inhibitors to entrepreneurship in the country.
It's interesting you also measure the ability and the likelihood for small businesses to take on risk. And Brazilians seen as the most willing to take on new risk. Over 56% of respondents there describe themselves as risk-taking. I mean, how does South Africa measure up on a global scale, looking at your survey on that?
South Africans, by their very nature, are very optimistic. People are pretty gung-ho here, and you certainly see that optimism coming through when you talk to our client base, which are those of small to medium businesses. So I would safely say that South Africans are very optimistic. We're able to take risk, and we encourage risk. And entrepreneurship is deeply encouraged in this country today, mm-hmm. and you're seeing it more and more happening in South Africa as opposed to somewhat, when they say, in the past 10 years. And you can certainly see it. We can see it from a client perspective. We can see how the increasing client base is coming about in the country. Mm-hmm. And as I said, we're able to track this on an annual basis through the survey.
How's the nature of a small business changed? And since you've been tracking it in terms of how big these businesses are, what sectors they're operating in, some of the factors that they describe as the biggest challenges. I mean, what would mark some of the key changes that you've seen over the past few years?
Well, the biggest, from a technology standpoint, obviously the internet's played a major role in the transformation of these businesses, the way they operate, the way they market their products. Which if you take 10 years ago, 15 years ago, traditional marketing is somewhat different to what it is today, because the pervasiveness of the web and the internet has made it completely different. So the playing fields have changed, and I think that the world has changed. And businesses that start out in South Africa and start up in South Africa, small to medium enterprises, are able to transact not only in South Africa, but in other parts of Africa, and also eventually when they become larger businesses, they're able to globalize to some degree.
So they can trade their goods offshore. Are they investing their money offshore? I mean, where's capital of small businesses going in your experience? Because that, of course, has been a big theme. We're looking at whether companies are still investing in the local economy. Are you seeing more and more of them concerned around investing money here?
Not at all. We see, in fact, we spoke about it this morning when we did the presentation, and we were having a panel discussion there with Alec Hogg, myself, and our CFO. And we spoke about these small businesses, where they're able to get capital, because one of the issues that was raised was that the bank's inability to fund small business. And that makes sense because small businesses or startup businesses are high-risk ventures often. So you can understand the lack of appetite from a banking standpoint. And often these businesses bootstrap their way to success. And I think that is a major indicator and measure among small businesses. But you certainly see them reinvesting in this country. I think people are far more optimistic. And South Africa now at the foot of Africa, where there's major prospects coming in from the rest of Africa, and we're seeing it within our own business now.